Are you ready for a deep dive? Today, we are exploring some seriously mind-bending ideas about reality and how we perceive it.
Sounds intriguing.
We'll be looking at two really fascinating texts, the Tibetan Book of the Dead, which, just quickly, is like this guide to navigating the afterlife, and the Unknowing Sage,
Which is?
a biography of the Hindu mystic Baba Faqir Chand.
Ah,
The cool thing is how these two figures from totally different spiritual backgrounds came to some like really surprisingly similar conclusions
about.
about the nature of visions, especially those experienced during death and the path to, well, enlightenment.
Yeah, it really is remarkable. Despite coming from different traditions, they both emphasize that what we perceive,
Mm.
especially when we're dying, might actually be an illusion.
Wait, so you're saying those visions people talk about, like seeing bright light or hearing amazing music, might not even be real?
That's exactly what both the Tibetan Book of the Dead and Fakir Chand's experiences suggest. These visions might just be projections of our own minds, shaped by our actions, our karma, and even our deepest desires.
So it's like our mind is putting on a personalized reality show, even as we're like crossing over to the other side. Okay, tell me more about this Baba Faqir Chand. His experiences sound wild.
He really dedicated his life to exploring consciousness, mainly through meditation, and he had a ton of mystical experiences. Okay, so there's this one story that stands out. During World War I, Fakir Chan was in this, really terrifying battle.
Oh, wow.
And right in the middle of all this fear and chaos, he has a vision of his guru, Shiv Bratlal,
Okay.
who appears to, calm him down, telling him that the enemy isn't actually attacking.
Whoa, hold on. Did his guru like actually physically show up to guide him?
That's what Fakir Chan thought at the time. But get this, when he later told his guru about this whole experience,
Yeah.
well, Shiv Bratlal was like, nope, I wasn't there. I didn't appear to you at all.
No way. So if it wasn't his guru, who or what did Fakir Chand see? That's crazy.
It definitely makes you think, right, about what we really perceive and what is real. And it gets even wilder.
How?
Around the same time, Fakir Chand's friends were also in danger and praying for help.
Oh, no.
But instead of seeing their guru, they had a vision of Fakir Chand.
What?
Yeah, and he guided them to safety.
So they all had these super intense, real experiences, but none of it actually happened? I mean, that just blows my mind.
Right. These experiences were a turning point for Fakir Chand. He started to seriously question if his visions were objectively real. He started to look deeper, trying to figure out where they were really coming from.
So what did he discover?
Well, he realized that even visions of, deities or his guru were essentially creations of his own mind, which, by the way, totally echoes the teachings in the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Whoa. So both Fakir Chan and the Tibetan Book of the Dead are basically saying our minds can create these really convincing
It
realities.
seems that way.
That's a huge realization. It makes you wonder how much of what we see, what we think is real, is actually just shaped by our own beliefs and expectations.
It's a question worth pondering, for sure. And this is where the concept of Maya comes in, a term used in both Hinduism and Buddhism.
Maya.
Yeah, it refers to the illusory nature of the world. It's
Yeah.
like a veil that obscures true reality from us.
So it's like a filter that distorts what we see, making us perceive things that aren't really there. Like how our desires or fears color how we experience things.
You got it. And Maya can even influence our deepest spiritual experiences. Makes it super hard to tell what's real and what's just our mind messing with us.
Yeah.
Think about it, right? Even in our everyday lives, our desires and fears can change how we see things,
Right.
making us believe things that might not be true at all.
Yeah, it's like that saying, seeing is believing, but maybe it's more like believing is seeing.
Exactly. Our beliefs shape our perceptions in ways we might not even realize.
That's mind-blowing. So how did Fakir Chand react to this whole idea of Maya and realizing his visions might not be, well, real?
You know, it could be really unsettling to discover that even the most profound spiritual experiences could be influenced by our minds.
I bet.
But instead of freaking out or rejecting it, Fakir Chan actually embraced this realization.
Mm.
He went even further, acknowledging that even the concept of truth itself might be beyond our grasp.
Really?
Yeah, he once said, I do not proclaim that whatever I say is correct or final. Nature is unfathomable. No one has known it.
Wow. That's a very humble perspective.
Right. Especially coming from someone who dedicated his life to spiritual exploration.
Yeah, it makes you think. He's basically saying, even I, someone who spent their life seeking truth, don't have all the answers.
He was very aware of the limits of human understanding, even in spiritual matters. He recognized that we can't fully grasp the ultimate truth with our limited human minds.
That's pretty profound.
It is. It really is humbling, right? And if even a mystic like Fakir Chand admitted that, where does that leave the rest of us? This is where his idea of hanging on the gallows comes in.
Okay, hanging on the gallows. That's a pretty intense phrase. What did he mean by that?
It's a metaphor he used to represent complete detachment, like letting go of everything, even the idea of a self.
Whoa. So he's talking about radical acceptance, right? Accepting that we can't really know everything and just surrendering to the mystery of it all.
Exactly. It's about accepting the limits of what we can know and just being okay with that,
Yeah.
which, actually ties in really well with the Tibetan Book of the Dead. It also talks about letting go of attachment as the way to reach a higher state of being. In fact, maybe we should shift gears a bit and talk about that text now.
Yeah, let's do that.
You might be surprised to learn that the Tibetan Book of the Dead isn't really about death, at least not in the way we usually think of it.
Oh, really? How would you describe it then?
It's more of a guidebook for navigating what's called the bardo.
The bardo.
Yeah, in Tibetan Buddhism, it refers to that in-between state, after death and before rebirth.
So it's like a roadmap for the afterlife, helping you navigate what to expect and all that.
Exactly. And it's surprisingly detailed. It outlines all kinds of experiences a person might go through in the bardo. Visions of deities, feelings of confusion, fear.
So they were trying to, like, prepare you for every possible scenario you might encounter after you die.
That's the idea. They believed that if you're already familiar with the teachings in the Tibetan Book of the Dead before you die, you'll be better equipped to handle all those experiences and, ultimately reach liberation.
So it's like having a guidebook for the ultimate journey. But wouldn't knowing what to expect kind of ruin the mystery of it all?
Well, the book isn't about getting rid of the mystery, but more about understanding the nature of reality itself. It wants you to be able to spot illusions for what they are.
Okay, that makes sense. So what kind of instructions does the Tibetan Book of the Dead actually give? I mean, for navigating this bardo state?
One of the key things is recognizing the clear void light.
The clear void light.
Yeah, it's this light that appears at the moment of death. It's described as this, pure, radiant, all-encompassing light. And it represents the true nature of reality.
Okay. And recognizing this light is important because...
Well, the Tibetan Book of the Dead warns that if you don't recognize this clear void light, you might be drawn to other, less pure lights.
Oh, okay.
And these other lights, they represent different realms of existence, some good, some not so good. It's
Like a cosmic crossroads
yeah.
where you have to choose the right path, or you might end up somewhere you don't want to be.
Yeah, exactly. And the choices you make in the bardo, they believe those are determined by your karma, the actions you took in your previous lives.
So even in the afterlife, your past actions still have consequences. Interesting.
That's the idea. And the Tibetan Book of the Dead makes it clear you can't just escape from the consequences of what you've done. But it also offers hope. Even if you, make mistakes in the bardo, you can still find your way back to that clear void light.
Oh, okay. That's good to know. But how do you actually recognize the right light? I mean, how do you avoid getting distracted by all the other visions and stuff? It sounds super overwhelming.
Well, that's where those specific instructions come in. The book gives you meditations and visualizations to help you stay focused on that clear void light, even when everything else is trying to grab your attention.
So it's like mental training for the afterlife.
Right. And a really big part of it is recognizing that all those visions and experiences, they're actually projections of your own mind.
Wait a second, isn't that similar to what we were saying about Faqir Chand? It's amazing how these two totally different traditions are basically saying the same thing.
It is pretty remarkable. The idea that what we perceive as real might just be our own minds at work. Makes you wonder if there are certain truths about consciousness that go beyond any one culture.
Definitely something to think about. But for now, let's get back to those practical tips from the Tibetan Book of the Dead. How are you supposed to deal with those mental projections?
The book says to view them with detachment, to see them as temporary, insubstantial, like clouds passing in the sky. It also tells you to remember the teachings you've received in your life, especially about emptiness and the nature of the self.
So the key is to, like, not get swept away by the drama of it all. Just observe those visions with a calm, detached mind.
Exactly. The idea is not to get caught up in them. Don't identify with them. See them as temporary, not as something that defines you.
It's like instead of being a character in the movie, you're watching the movie of your own mind.
That's a great way to put it. And like with any movie, you can either get lost in the emotions and plot, or you can just sit back and watch it unfold.
So by recognizing those visions are just projections, you can avoid getting trapped in them and stay focused on that clear void light.
Right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And the more you practice that kind of detachment in life, the more prepared you'll be when you encounter all of that in the bardo.
So it's not just about what happens after we die, but about how we live now. It can help us deal with all sorts of complexities, both in life and death.
Absolutely. The Tibetan Book of the Dead emphasizes how the way we live shapes our experience in the afterlife. It's about preparing for that ultimate journey and navigating the challenges to reach liberation.
This deep dive has really changed how I think about death. It's fascinating how the Tibetan Book of the Dead takes something that's usually scary and turns it into a roadmap for spiritual growth.
It's a pretty amazing shift in perspective, right?
Oh,
And it
no.
really highlights how life and death are connected. What we do now affects our experience beyond this physical realm.
That's a powerful idea. It makes you realize every moment matters and that we have the power to choose our path in this life and beyond. Exactly. The Tibetan Book of the Dead guides us in making those choices wisely. We talked about the clear void light, the bardo, and detachment. But there's one more thing about the Tibetan Book of the Dead I think we should touch on.
Oh, okay. What else is there to uncover in this book?
Remember you were curious about the peaceful and wrathful deities.
Oh, yeah. I've always wondered about those figures.
They're definitely some of the most striking images in the Tibetan Book of the Dead. But like everything else in the text, they're not meant to be taken literally.
So they're not really gods and demons.
Not in the traditional sense. Think of them more as archetypes, representations of different parts of our own minds.
Okay, so the peaceful deities, they stand for the positive qualities we cultivate, like compassion and wisdom.
Yes, exactly. And the wrathful deities? Well, they represent the negative qualities, things we need to work on. Anger, attachment, ignorance.
So it's like a battle between good and evil is happening inside our minds.
That's a good way to picture it. According to the Tibetan Book of the Dead, the key is to recognize these deities for what they are, parts of ourselves that we need to integrate and eventually move beyond.
So it's not about getting rid of those negative qualities, but more about understanding them and transforming them into something positive.
Precisely. The goal is to reach a state of balance where all parts of us are in harmony.
It's really cool how the Tibetan Book of the Dead uses all this vivid imagery to describe what's going on inside us psychologically.
It's very effective,
Yeah.
right? And it reminds us that, the path to enlightenment isn't always easy. There are going to be challenges, temptations, times when we feel fear and confusion.
But even with all those challenges, it's still a journey worth taking to find liberation and realize who we truly are.
Absolutely. The Tibetan Book of the Dead is a compassionate and insightful guide for that journey, both while we're alive and after we die.
This conversation has been really eye-opening. I never thought of the Tibetan Book of the Dead this way. It's not about being obsessed with death, but about understanding consciousness and what's real.
It really is a unique and powerful perspective
Hmm.
on life, death, and everything in between.
I'm definitely ready to go even deeper.
Sounds good.
Welcome back. So we've been talking about the Tibetan Book of the Dead and the life of Baba Faqir Chand,
Yeah.
and how they both have these like really profound insights into consciousness. But I was thinking, I think we could maybe add another layer to this conversation.
Yeah. What do you mean?
Well, we've been talking about how our perceptions, especially during like intense experiences, could just be our minds playing tricks on us.
Mm-hmm.
And that actually reminds me a lot of what neuroscience is finding out,
Yeah.
about how our brains construct reality.
That's interesting. How so?
Well, neuroscience shows that our brains are constantly filtering and interpreting sensory information, creating a model of the world that's different for everyone.
Right. So we're each kind of living in our own, like, personalized simulation of reality.
Exactly. And that makes me think about like Fakir Chand's visions and those Bardo experiences in the Tibetan Book of the Dead.
Yeah.
What if those experiences are also just our brains, like trying to make sense of these unusual states of consciousness?
So you're saying our minds could be creating these narratives and images
Mm-hmm.
based on our own personal beliefs and experiences.
Yeah, exactly. It wouldn't necessarily make them less meaningful, but it would definitely be a different way to understand them.
I see what you mean. Instead of thinking of those visions as literal glimpses into the afterlife, we could see them more as metaphors for the transition of consciousness, the process of letting go, all that.
Right. It's almost like our brains are trying to connect what we know with the huge unknown by using, symbolism and imagery that we're already familiar with.
I like that. It speaks to that human need to understand the world around us, even when we're faced with those really big mysteries.
And that brings us back to, like, a key theme we've been exploring this whole time.
Which is?
The illusory nature of reality. I
Oh.
mean, whether we're looking at these ancient texts or modern science, the message is kind of the same.
What's that?
That what we think is real might just be a projection of our own minds.
That's a pretty powerful idea. And it can be, well, a little scary too,
Mm.
you know?
Oh, yeah, for sure. It makes you think about all the things we take for granted.
Right. It's freeing because it means we don't have to be stuck with a rigid view of how things are. But it's also a bit daunting because
Yeah.
because it means accepting that there are some things we may never fully understand.
Like, we're standing on the edge of this, like, infinite abyss and peering into our own consciousness. Kind of amazing, but a little terrifying at the same time.
Exactly. And, how we approach that abyss, whether we're curious or afraid, will probably shape what we experience.
This reminds me of Fakir Chand's idea of hanging on the gallows. He was basically saying that to truly see beyond the illusions, you have to let go of everything, even your sense of self.
It's like a complete surrender to the mystery of it all, being okay with not having all the answers.
And I think that's something we can all practice, even in our everyday lives, by, like, questioning things, challenging our beliefs, and learning to detach.
That makes sense.
We can start to loosen the grip of our ego and open ourselves up to a bigger, more expansive view of reality.
It's a journey, for sure, but one that can lead to some really incredible growth and change.
So as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave our listeners with one final thought. Do you remember Fakir Chand's last words?
Oh yeah, black box. He said, when I come back, it will be in a black box.
Right. What if that black box, is a symbol for consciousness itself, like a mystery that we can only explore so far with our current understanding? What if death isn't really an ending, but more of a transition?
And a way.
Well, that's the mystery, a realm beyond what we can even imagine right now. Maybe that black box reminds us that there's always more to learn, more to discover, and that exploring consciousness doesn't just end when our bodies die.
Maybe it's actually just the beginning of a whole new chapter.
And on that note, we'll leave you to continue your own explorations. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into reality, perception, and consciousness. We hope it sparked your curiosity and maybe inspired you to keep questioning and keep searching for the truth, both within yourself and out in the universe.